Good evening, everybody. Hope you're having a good weekend. Today is July 19th, 2025. We're at block height 906,297 on the blockchain. Of course, the Bitcoin blockchain, the only one that matters outside of the blockchain of your life, which is basically the days you get to live stacked up upon each other. It's funny how similar those two things are. So, today, I'd like to do a book review, another book review of The Mandibles, a family. And it is a story, a fiction story of a family that is in the not so distant future. So in the 2030s decade and the 2040s decades. And it's written by Lionel Shriver or Lionel Shriver. I don't know exactly how to pronounce her name, but she's a woman. She writes a lot of books about controversial topics, which if you're normal, they're not so controversial. If you have a mature and sound mind, they're actually very rational. But to certain people, they might say, wow, this is obscure or odd or uncomfortable. I don't really like this subject matter, but it's reality, it's truth, and some people have a tough time living in reality. So, The Mandibles, what is it? It has an odd name. The Mandibles is a very strange name for a book, but it's the name of the family within the book, and it just makes me, visualize odd things. It's just, I don't know, but anyway, the book is, like I said, nonfiction, but it's kind of a look into the near future. So it may not be fiction after all. It may describe a family very similar to your own, depending on what you do in the coming years with your life and your money. So just a primer before I get into it here, I am going to give away a lot of information of the book in this video. So if you haven't read it yet and you want to read it without having anything spoiled, then, please stop here, go read the book, and then come back if you like. But if you don't feel like spending the time reading, although you should, it's a really good book. I'm going to give away some information here that will relate to Bitcoin, that will relate to building wealth, understanding reality and what's going on, and avoiding absolute poverty for you and your family. So, The Mandible starts out, and it starts introducing the characters of the story, and there's a very wealthy, they call him the great-grand man, Doug Mandible, and he has built a lot of wealth, lives very high on the hog, rightfully so. He has a mansion and he has businesses or whatever that made him wealthy, and so he's doing really great. And he has a young relative that is hopeful that someday he's going to pass away and pass down all this wealth, and so this young relative feels obligated to go visit him and say hello, and check in and make sure that the will stays intact, so that he inherits all this wealth. And over time, they notice there's articles in the news and there's headlines and stuff about the economy going down. The government's going to have to bail us out again, corporations out again, and all this stuff. And inflation's high and the poor people are really struggling, but the wealthy are still somewhat intact. And during this time also, there's a new global currency being invented called the Bancor. And it's this great, bright idea between all the leading nations, and they're going to be harmonized on this one new global currency. And it's going to be the new thing that's going to save us from the dollar. And the dollar's hyperinflating away. People can't buy normal necessities. They can't afford rent. They can't afford groceries. They can't afford healthcare. Does this sound familiar? It should, because that's happening right now in 2025. But it's progressing to a degree that it's becoming more and more unattainable for everybody. And what ends up happening is, over time in this story, during these visits to the great grandman and stuff, things start declining. The great grandman Doug Mandible loses his home. They have to sell that off to pay for his living expenses and things like that. So it's like, that's kind of a blow. We're losing the real estate, but it's okay. We still have money, and the younger guy watching over him is thinking, I'll still get an inheritance. We're okay. And then he moves into a really expensive high-end like care facility, and the expenses to live there are just astronomical, and so very few people get afforded that luxury, old people in this story. And even today, I think it's going to be very difficult in the future for old people to get the care that they need, and the young have to work and can't afford to take the old in because they're at work all day. And we have this issue where old people are basically being farmed out to these warehouses of you know dire living conditions, where you're sharing a room with 4 or 5 other people, eating some of the worst food on planet Earth, and just like subsistence living. It's very depressing if you've ever been in one of those places to visit a loved one. And so here's somebody that was wealthy, multimillionaire, losing their home, moving into one of these places, can't really afford it anymore, and it starts to decline even more. So this is happening over a period of years, and there's themes of people can't afford rent, people can't afford groceries, the husband and the wife need to work, the kids need to work to afford to live, and there's just this slow decline, like what's happening now. People are complaining about things like, man, home prices keep going up. What's going on with that? Man, every time I go to the grocery store, prices are going up. Is your income going up? Probably not. That's going to be a problem. So quit denying it and start acting on it. So the people think that the bank war is going to be, the future, but things like capital controls start happening, so people can't come into the U.S. with bank wars without declaring them and getting them taxed out to no end, and the tax rates is another thing that just keeps getting higher and higher and higher. And I forget what the tax rate is in the book, but it gets up to something insidious like 70-80% tax rate. So you're keeping 20-30 cents on the dollar for your work, and that's because the government's just hyperinflating the currency away. They can't afford their expenses for wars and whatever else they're doing. So they got to take it from you. And they will do that without hesitation. So Doug Mandible goes from being wealthy to living in a care home to not being able to afford the care home. They sell off all of his possessions to pay for the care home, but even still, they can't afford it anymore. So he eventually has to leave and go move in with family, and they're living with in a shared housing situation where there's tons of people living in this house, and it's basically squalor. They have to recycle and save water. They have a very, very limited diet. They go to the store and there's very limited options for food. They don't go with a list of things that they want. They just go and grab whatever they can get their hands on and whatever they can afford, and try not to get robbed in the process. They come back and they have to be careful with their gas consumption in the car and everything like that. And they're limited really by whatever subsistence items they can get from the grocery store. And it could be just random bits of food that they have to mash together and figure out how to eat and feed a dozen people or however many people are in the house at the time. More and more characters keep coming in and joining the group as they fall further and further into poverty and lose their homes. And it just becomes sadder and sadder as they try to figure out where they're going to put the kids, where they're going to put the people, and whatever. And the funniest part of the story is one of the characters, his name's Lowell, and he is an economist in the traditional world, the fiat world. And he is still under the false belief that things are going to just work out eventually. The government just needs to get their hands in things and get a bailout going, whatever. And all the traditional economic models are coming back and everything's going to be fine. This is just a depression. We'll get out of it. And they're literally eating like scraps of food. They're using gray water, which is, you know, stuff they're doing their dishes with to wash themselves and brush their teeth and drink. And, you know, it's horrible. It's absolutely horrible. And it's dirty. You can't get health care. People are getting robbed. People are getting attacked, murdered, all these different things. It's a scary world. And so you have that guy living there. And then you have the young, I don't know if he's a nephew, but his name's Willing. And he starts to recognize that things are going south and he's got to do something about it. And working isn't really doing anything because you get taxed to no end and unemployment's super high. There's only one person working in the house and they're barely bringing in enough to cover the bills. And so Willing starts to resort to stealing from people that he sees opportunities to steal from, but he does it in sort of a fair way, you know. So instead of taking all of their food, he'll just take some of it. And so he tries to be kind of like a graceful thief and say, look, I got some of your stuff, I'm going to take this and run with it, but I'm not taking everything. And you know, the family starts to kind of question what's going on with that, how is he getting food, whatever. But he's basically telling them, look guys, we're in decline and we don't have enough of the real things that we need. You think going to work and getting more dollars is going to help. You think the government's going to come help and bail us out and everything's going to be fine. Other people think this alternative currency is the way to go. But basically we're all screwed and you're not recognizing it. You think help is going to arrive and come in on a white horse and save the day. And so he resorts to action. And so all sorts of different things happen in the story, but it gets really dark. And if you're not into understanding the things that happen when society goes into decline and people resort to their lowest common denominator as far as human nature and things like that, it gets ugly really fast. And we're already seeing cracks of this in society. So there's all these movements right now for wokeism, for anti-family, anti-caring. You just need to be nihilistic and only care about yourself and be a hedonist, and it's all about me, not about raising the next generation and pouring more into them. Who cares about them? The planet's dying, we don't need them. That's kind of where things are going, and you get all these crazy perverse mindsets from that that should not be around, but they are, because everybody's panicking and only thinking about tomorrow, not thinking long term, and only thinking for themselves and not for others. So that is the ultimate source of misery, is only thinking about yourself. So if you have a lot of anxiety, if you're miserable, depressed, it's probably because you're only thinking about yourself. Just keep that in mind as part of this story. So Willing, the guy that's going out there and stealing and trying to find sustenance for his family, is doing pretty well. You got this economist that's down there typing on his little phone thinking, oh, one of these days we're going to be saved, and he's not doing well. Him and his wife aren't doing well. And then you got this old family, and at this point in the story, Doug's wife ends up losing her mind. She gets severe dementia and needs to be taken care of. Well, they can't afford the care for her, so they got to take care of this crazy woman that doesn't know what reality is anymore. And she can't, you know, hold her bathroom, all that type of stuff. She's incontinent, she's insane, just saying random stuff. So they're living in this hell where they got to take care of somebody that needs 24/7 surveillance, mental help. You got an old man that can't really do anything besides consume food. Then you got all these kids, all these different people in there that need food. They can't work or do anything, and it's just a living hell. And if you think this can't happen, look at countries, study hyperinflation in different countries. It's a phenomenon that's happened over thousands of years. So go back way in early history, hyperinflation's happened, like the Roman Empire, things like that. And then go back in recent history, hyperinflation's happened. Cases like Argentina, Venezuela, those are they were previously very prosperous countries, that have had the wealth completely wiped out and stolen from the people, centralized to the party in power, and squandered and wasted for generations. And so to think that that couldn't happen in a place like the United States with fiat currency, you're absolutely fooling yourself if you think that couldn't happen. It's a miracle it hasn't happened up to this point, honestly. But it's just been kept in place by lies and credit and everything like that. So eventually it's going to come crashing down. And your only hope to get away from that is Bitcoin. And thank God we have a solution for that as sovereign individuals. So the story takes some dark turns. It just shows this decline that we're kind of living through. Our pace is a little bit slower right now, but it has the potential to get a lot faster. And basically the end of it, towards the end of it, is they start to discover there's these communities or these circular economies in different places that people are thriving and using a different currency, a local currency, and they're doing trade freely. They don't track each other. They don't, they follow very limited laws, and they use a currency that's backed by gold, and they believe in that, and they have low taxes, all these great things. And so the family recognizes they got to get out of Dodge. I didn't mention it, but they live in New York City. And so it's gone to hell. There's prostitution going on. There's homeless everywhere. Nobody can eat. There's crime everywhere. Basically, what forces them out of their house during the book is that they get their house stolen from them. Somebody comes in with a gun, and they get their home stolen from them. It's another learning example for the young man willing. He understands that the only thing that really grants you power and sovereignty is your ability to defend yourself. And if you can't do that, you have no control over your life. So he ends up finding a gun or getting a gun from somewhere. I don't know if he stole it or bought it, whatever, but he ends up getting a gun to ensure their sovereignty. So even in good times, if you don't have the upper hand in a fight or the means to defend yourself, then you have no sovereignty. So think about that. And basically the end of the story, that some of the characters get killed off due to different things, and they go their separate ways. But Willing, and I believe, I don't know if it's his grandma or aunt, but she's older, they end up getting a car and driving across the country to one of the enclaves, which is in the state of Nevada. And it's the free state of the new United States, or USN. And they have their own currency there, low taxes, all these things like I mentioned, and things are going pretty well there. It's better. You have to work to get by. They don't take the old currency from the other world, but things are abundant. People have places to live. There's food, there's water, and it's turning around. But the difficult thing is at the end, the author makes a comment that, although taxes were low at 10%, they had to raise them within 2 years to 11% or something like that, of course. And so it kind of has a dark twist at the end where it's like, yeah, they started this new community. You think there's this enclave away from, the destitute U.S. government and all this stuff. But when they get there, they realize it's not utopia. There's a lot of work that still needs done. And not only that, but the people in charge start to kind of fall into the old ways of, oh, we're not making it, so we better raise taxes, So it kind of ends in a dark twist. And it doesn't really talk that much about this new utopia and stuff. So overall, it's a fantastic book. If you like doomsday type stuff or apocalyptic type stuff, absolutely read this. It's not apocalyptic in that sense, like zombie or anything like that. It literally is like if you hit the fast forward button on the next couple of decades, it's probably going to be very similar to what we see going on here in the US, honestly. I mean, just think about how many more homeless you see out on the streets these days, how many more drug addicts, how many more deaths you see due to drugs or crime or whatever. I mean, we are heading in the wrong direction as a society. And so this is just kind of a precursor to all of that. And if you don't believe it's going to happen and you just want to put your head in the sand, go right ahead. But if you want to avoid that for yourself and your family, highly encourage you to learn how to use Bitcoin and stack it and save it for another day. It's the only way you're going to be able to preserve your wealth. Fiat is being diluted every hour of every day. Stocks, equities, bonds, things like that, again, are being diluted. They're based in fiat. And the ownership structure of those is such that if there were a big debt crisis or global event, the rightful owners, who are not you, trust me, it's not you, are going to take those, and you will be left with nothing. The money in the bank, aside from being devalued, is not there. It's not yours. It's being lent out at a 10-to-1 ratio. So, for every dollar that you have in there, they might have, a tenth of that ready, 10 cents of that ready for you if there was a bank run. But honestly, if there's a bank run, you're not getting your money out. You could use gold and silver and those types of traditional commodities, but you got to hold on to that and keep it in your possession, secure it physically, which is very challenging to do, especially in tough times if you can't watch it, monitor it 24/7. Not only that, but we don't know how much gold supply there is out there. So its supply currently grows about 2% a year, which basically means its value is being cut in half every, 30 years or so. And because of that inflation rate. And in addition to that, we do not know how much gold is out there. So somebody could discover a bunch of gold tomorrow and drive the price way down and the value way down. So don't say it could never happen. You never know. But the only thing that is completely fixed in supply and will only be issued at a certain rate for the next several decades is Bitcoin. And it is growing exponentially day over day. And over time, you see double-digit growth out of Bitcoin, which is what you need to beat inflation. If you're not getting significant double-digit growth, you are getting behind. And you probably don't even realize it. These last 5 years through the pandemic era, people have felt their house prices go up. If they own houses, they've seen their stocks go up. So they get this false sense of security, false sense of comfort that things are going well. But at the same rate, everything else has gone up. Your insurance, your healthcare, your food, your mortgage rates, everything has gone up. Cars, things that you need have gotten more expensive. So those gains are basically breaking even with the cost of living. You need more multiples of double digits to get ahead. And Bitcoin's the only asset returning that. And it will be the only asset in the future returning that over long term. So get yourself some Bitcoin, read the Mandibles. It's a great book. Highly recommend it. And prevent that future for you and your family, and own real things and good things. It wouldn't be a bad idea to stock up on some food and water securely in your personal residence. It wouldn't be a bad idea to secure your personal residence and have the means to secure that. And that really is the only way you're going to maintain your sovereignty. Of course, you want to have cold hard sats in your possession, in cold storage that nobody can get their hands on, the government, your enemies, anything like that. If you have Bitcoin stored in a multi-sig cold storage wallet, it's essentially untouchable. Even if somebody wanted to threaten your life, they can't get it. Even if you wanted to try to give it up to them, they can't get it in a multi-sig cold storage situation that's geographically dispersed. That's a key point there too. But anyway, I'm going to cut it off there. That was kind of a long book review, but I highly recommend it. And if you're a Bitcoiner, you definitely should read it. Even if you're not, you should definitely read it. But it's been out since 2016, so I'm surprised I haven't come around it sooner. But anyway, I'm going to cut it off there, and I will talk to you in the next one.